We need to give developers better DevOps. I'm sorry, developers' lives are very easy compared to operations engineers' lives. You guys got napped pods, right? There's 200 of you. Like, the goal of platform engineering should go back to that DevOps article. We need to scale operational talent.
Welcome to another edition of Cloud Unfiltered. I'm your host, Michael Chenitz, and today I have Cory O'Daniel with me. And Cory, you wrote some interesting papers, and we'll get into that in a couple minutes. But tell us a little bit about like who you are, you know, what you started from, and where you are kind of now. In one word.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. I'm an operations and I guess DevOps engineer, for lack of a better term. We haven't come up with one in 15 years. I'm an operations engineer. Background is originally in healthcare information systems, worked in data centers and AIX, moved to California in 2005-ish, and worked for a company that was in a data center. Our lease was expiring, and this shoe company, Amazon, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it, this shoe company, or sorry, it was a bookstore at the time, They launched this cloud thing. And so my boss walks by my desk one day and like, I'm an engineer, but I also worked in a data center. I was the only person on the team that had that overlap. So there was our data center guys who hadn't written software, and then there was our engineers, right? This is like before the DevOps term. And he was like, you're the only one on the team that's worked in a data center and writes software. I need you to figure out how to migrate us to Amazon's cloud computing stuff. And I was just like, I have no idea what you're talking about right now, but I was just like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. Like, And so kind of got pigeonholed into the DevOps role. I'm throwing air quotes on this for anybody who's listening via sound. In the early 2000s, and I've just been hanging on for dear life ever since.
No, I could totally relate because I mean, you know, I was working for financial companies back when cloud started, and you know, my job was to be the kind of architect role for the company and where we were going, and we were coming from AIX and from other systems, and we were told that we wanted to be cloud first, but nobody really knew what that meant yet. And really, my recommendation was that you needed to revise the programming and actually create this stuff for the cloud. And then and they were like, nah, we'll just put it in the cloud, and then we'll come back later and we'll do any changes. And you know what never happened?
Dude, there's nothing more permanent than a temporary solution.
Yes, and that's called a expensive second data center, not the cloud.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about your interests. You created this article. What was the article called?
So there's a series that's slowly rolling out now. So the first one was called DevOps is Bullshit, which it is, and we can talk about that.
I love that.
and the second one is called Elephant in the Clouds. It's kind of the follow-up. So the DevOps is Bullshit, as some eloquent person on Reddit put it, I'm a child that is ranting in that one. So I definitely am, but it's an important rant that I feel like we're not ranting about. And then Elephant in the Cloud is kind of the quantitative follow-up to it with the numbers. And so Microsoft had gotten wind of the blog post. They gave me the opportunity to write a follow-up on the Microsoft blog, a lot less and more numbers. So if you like attitude, go read DevOps is Bullshit. If you like being scared of numbers, I would go read Elephant in the Cloud.
And for those of us, that are out there that haven't read DevOps is Bullshit or Elephant in the Cloud, tell us like in a small like synopsis of what. Let's start with the first one. Let's go there, and then we'll continue on.
So I think the reason that the DevOps is bullshit, I think the first one is like nobody can define it, and you might say, I know somebody who can define it, but like we can't. The globe, right? This is something that's supposed to be culture based. We can't agree on the definition, so like we're not on a good foot to start, right? And so you see people kind of like throw it in like one of three camps. There's the people that believe DevOps is literally the developers also do the operations. That's fine. If you're a CTO of a single person engineering team, that's great. But at scale, that falls apart, right? As soon as you're a feature developer, like somebody who's working on product, and you have to worry about compliance and your OPA rules, and is checkoff configured correctly, like you're not building business value. That is the only reason you are there as a developer, right? Is to build business value. So like, should you be doing all of this like ops stuff? Probably not, right? And then we have the people that like DevOps is, oh, it's really about tearing down the walls. Like there's two distinct teams still, but we just make it easier for them to collaborate. And like we have a DevOps culture. And it's like, okay, like 9 people have pulled that off. Like most of us haven't. And there's proof. There's proof they haven't. It's called the Dora report. We like to read like page 1 through 3 and see like the big number that's like everyone's doing better. But then when you get to page 37, it's like 50% of the people that took the Dora report survey typically have 5-day outages. And it's just like awesome culture you got there, right? Like that is the status quo of where we are. And then there's this niche where it's like, there's DevOps teams. And I think everybody looks at that group and they're like, I don't know what that means. Like, I don't know what that means. And like, my point in the blog is that group in the middle is doing the real work. Like that is where we should be going. Like that DevOps team, like that is the platform engineering mindset. You have a team that has a mix of these two things that are trying to make it easy for the rest of the engineers to be able to do their job. But the problem is we don't have enough DevOps people on the planet to do that. And most people can't afford to build a second product. It's unrealistic, right? And so you see this huge push. We're one of the companies like, you should go do platform engineering. Everyone should. It's unrealistic that you can. And so like, where does that leave us as a company? Where does that leave us as an industry? Where does that leave us as civilization? Because guess what? I got news. Everybody's moving to the cloud. Everybody's a software company. And so if we're all doing this and we're all putting all of our information into all these products, who's securing it? Who's keeping it compliant? Because we like less than 5% of the engineering population has cloud experience. What are we doing, right? We're not teaching it in universities. We're not teaching it in boot camps. People only learn how to do cloud operations on the job. And we don't give them enough time to do that, right? So it's like, that's why it's bullshit. Like we have not embraced this idea of culture. We say it. We love to, no, the reason you guys are doing it wrong is because you just didn't get the culture right. And it's like, dude, you're right. Like you didn't get the culture right, but there's so much that adds up to that we're ignoring by just saying, oh, well, it's a cultural thing. You guys just didn't culture it right. And it's like, no, we didn't have the budget for it. Can't culture it if you don't have the budget for it. Right. So that's what the article is really about, is like we need to get past this, just like, well, you just didn't do the culture part right. Like there's a lot of existential problems to doing operations and doing cloud effectively. And we're not addressing those issues. And so platform engineering and IDPs and all these buzzwords that you hear people trying to sell you to like scale your operations team, these are valid options, but we need to figure out like how we get this scaled for all of the companies that are moving their applications to the cloud, whether they can build a platform internally, or if they have to buy one, or if they have to suck it up and go back to a PaaS. That's the truth. Is 30% of the people listening to this would probably be fine on Heroku. They just didn't want to run there because it doesn't sound cool, right? Like, sorry, so there's me selling one of my competitors. Yeah, go use that thing.
I actually liked Heroku. It was very easy to set up, very easy to.
I would argue Heroku was the first time that anybody actually got a taste of DevOps, right? That's the really funny thing with DevOps is like multiple layers to like that platform, right? And like if you're doing DevOps, like you build it, you run it. If I can build it and run it and you've just given me an abstraction, I'm still doing DevOps. I don't have to be like plugging some cat cable into a router to be doing DevOps, right? It's like given the abstraction that I have, like I can build and run something on Heroku. Great, you've done yourself a DevOps, right? Like fantastic. That experience, I feel like there's actually a really good quote from Kelsey Hightower in like a tweet from like years ago that I think like spawned like the platform engineering movement. It's like everybody wants Heroku, it's just they want to build it themselves, right? It's just like come join our team if that's the case.
Yeah, it's funny because the cloud providers really didn't help in this matter, because when you think about when the cloud providers came out, what they did is they had very little information about how to do it right. They had information about each and every service, and by the way, at the beginning there was only like 3 or 4 services. There wasn't like a lot, but then they really didn't help people to kind of figure out how to take their stuff and bring it into the cloud. And some of this might have been actually purposeful, because you know what? As it takes longer for them to do that, and as they bring stuff into the cloud, they're spending more money. So it's not really in their benefit to kind of create more instructions on how to do this the right way, because that would take some of the money away from them.
Yeah.
So that was
There's,
one of the problems. Yeah.
yeah. There's also the fact that all the clouds have their professional services arms that they're very happy to charge you if you don't understand their stuff. Like it's funny, like thinking about like what they're doing. The cloud, like nowhere on Amazon's site is they're like, this is going to be easy. Like you don't see case studies where they're like, look how easy it was for Bristol Myers to do X or whatever, right? It's just like what they see is, look at these thousands of case studies where we were capable enough to serve all these businesses. They're much more interested in being capable than being easy, right? Like, and that's a part of the rub is like, I think when we think of the cloud, we're like, oh, this is going to be so much easier. And it used to be, right? When there was 3 to 5 services, you're like, oh, they got SQS and they got EC2 and this classic VPC thing that sucks. But like it was easy then. It's like, oh, I take my monolith, I throw it on an EC2, and oh, I've got some background jobs. Like I can process that over SQS. Like that was easy. Today, where everybody expects everything to be as snappy as TikTok, and you have to start introducing microservices earlier, or you have to start introducing ML now earlier, like now you're juggling 10 to 15 services, right? More of your application is cloud services than application code, right? And like that's where it starts to that's where it changed. Like it was easier, it's gotten much harder, and I don't think that we've ever really like addressed that, and the clouds certainly haven't, right? Like otherwise, like everybody just be running on Lifesail, like.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too. I mean, the alternative right now is to use things that are, the major alternative is to use things that are open source. Open source does not always denote, ease of use, and and there are a ton more options than there have been in the past, and that actually adds to some of the frustration, because people who are new to it are like, well, I just wanted to get this thing in something called a container and put it in something called Kubernetes, maybe. And I don't know anything about CNIs or CSIs or, or any of the thousands of solutions that are on the landscape. I don't know anything about these things. Where do I even start? So, it becomes this really, really scary thing. And it's one thing to get it up and running. Everybody, I think, has the capability who's been in tech to get something up and running. But they don't necessarily have the capability to get it up and running and to make it scalable and to make it secured and to have the right flags and to have all these different, options. I think that's the key to really doing it well.
There's a lot of ands. There's even more you can add to that, right?
Oh, absolutely. That's the case.
Well, that's the catch with the concept of like the wild concept of like your software engineers do everything. It's like, okay, like with all those ands, like here's the reality. You've got me for 40 hours a week. What do you want me to do? Do you want me to make the button click faster to sell more of the things? Or do you want me to make this stuff more compliant? Well, guess what? If it's SOC 2 time, you want me to make it more compliant. But when it's not SOC 2 time, like your PM doesn't give a shit. Like, right? Your PM's incentivized by you selling more things, the button clicking faster, like, and that's where we put our attention. And that's fine because we're businesses and it's cheap to buy an Experian, protection plan when you leak everybody's information, right? Sorry, that's me being sarcastic.
No, so how do we fix this? How do we get to a state where it's easier for people that need to do this stuff to do this stuff, and and make it almost as easy as a lot of the clouds do if you're on a single cloud, or I feel like there's some kind of middle ground that we haven't attained yet. That makes it easier. And by the way, the world is getting more complex. We're adding security layers and SBOMs and all these other kinds of things that you need to add on top of it. That's going to be regulated more heavily, more and more. So what's the answer to get either people more educated, to make it easier, to bring things together? What is an answer actually? Let's start there.
Yeah, I think there's a couple, and I think that some of them are unrealistic, right? I mean, what's funny is like when we think about software, and Elephant in the Cloud goes into this a bit more. If you think about software in the past 60 years or so, like nothing's changed much about our software. You might be like, what are you talking about? Everything's changed. I got node modules now. But it's like when you think about like our code, like if you go take some COBOL and you take some Node.js and you put it side by side, it does the exact same thing, right? One little function. if somebody writes that COBOL and they know COBOL, and somebody writes that Node and they know Node, and you switch the pieces of paper, that JavaScript engineer is going to be able to figure out what the COBOL function does. And that COBOL engineer, despite not understanding the run loop of Node.js, is going to be able to figure out like what it's trying to do, right? If this loops some variables, right? Like different syntax. What's crazy is since 2004, everything about the way that we deploy applications has changed 4 or 5 times, right? Like there's writing the code and then there's operating it, which is the hard part. We've changed that a bunch, right? In 2003, you had a data center. Maybe you had some VMs in the data center, but you had a data center. AWS comes around. What was it, like Rackspace and Slice Host? These VMs that you could like slices of VMs. Okay, that's interesting. Like I don't have to have a data center. I can buy like a piece of a thing. Then there's like AWS. Okay, this is interesting. And then AWS is like, what if you didn't even have servers, right? And we bid on that. We're like, servers, that means no ops. It's like, no. The ops burden's actually higher with serverless than with the server. But like we got you on the hook now, right? Now you're paying a lot of money for this very, 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 very fractional compute. So now we're putting stuff in Lambdas in like 2010. That was all the craze, the serverless framework, right? Docker Swarm. People are like, I don't want that. This Docker thing is cool though, right? Sorry, Docker Swarm people, appreciate the effort and I love everything you've done for us. But then Kubernetes comes around. People are like, I can't wait to hate this for a decade. But like the reality is, I think Kubernetes is one of the solutions here. But then Kubernetes came out. But then all of a sudden there's serverless containers. That's interesting. We got serverless containers. Now, like everything about the way that we package and operate our software changes every couple of years. And the wild thing, I think the biggest thing that has impacted the way that we write code in the past 60 years, and potentially the way that we operate code, is LLMs, unfortunately. Like I'm not a big believer in them, but the amount of startups today that it's like they've got like a CRUD system, some users, and then like their software is literally just shipping their data out to somebody else's magic box. Like that's a fundamental shift in like how we write software, not for the people that are writing the LLM, for us. So when we think about like how much operations has changed in the past 20 years, it's changed a lot. But software, it's like we've just got different syntactical sugar. So I think one of the big things that we're unrealistic for us to do is start teaching this stuff for real in real universities, not at like, some 3-month-long college that you see on the side of the highway. Like real universities should start to teach things like Kubernetes. It's hard to teach AWS. It's hard to teach GCP because it's vendor specific and things are going to change by the time you're out of college. But like if we're starting to standardize on things like Kubernetes, and whether you hate Kubernetes or love Kubernetes, like just use this as filler for like this standardized model of how we work on the cloud. If we're all moving to the cloud, this should be a part of curriculum. And the thing that's scary about that is will it be Kubernetes in 4 years? We don't know. Because it's barely been it for the past 8 years that it's been around. And like, will something else replace it in 4 more years? We don't like, that's why I don't think that will happen. It changes too much for a university to bank on it. Boot camps, they could be helping, right? We're getting tons of engineers out of boot camps today, but the reality is like, they don't have time to teach them ops. Right? Like they got 3 months so these people can deliver value day one. They come out knowing how to build some stuff in Rails. That's fantastic. That's what your PM needs to ship more features. They come out knowing how to build stuff in React or Vue. That's fantastic. We need that to be able to sell more things. But how do we start reinvesting this this on-the-job training of cloud operations? The 2 places where people are learning the code isn't doing it. And Udemy is fine, but like what you're really asking of somebody is saying, hey, you worked 40 hours. What are you doing this weekend? You want to learn something else? And like that sucks. I'm 43. I got 2 kids now. I'm not doing that anymore. I did it for 20 years. It's exhausting. That's why my hairline's way. So how do we do this? Well, organizations can start having, some sort of apprenticeship programs and start to figure out how to apprentice in developers or people coming in from boot camps with the small amount of operations talent that they have. That's culture. That might actually be a little bit of DevOps right there. But the reality is, we got 150 software developers. We got 3 DevOps people. When the do they have time to help the 150 people, right? Do we cut out half the day? Do we give everybody like Learning Friday? Maybe, but now your throughput's cut by 20%, right? So like the reality is like we're not making enough DevOps people. We're not giving people enough time to learn unless they do it on their own. But the thing that sucks about doing it on your own is also cost money, right? The cloud's free. Yeah, it is until, you forget to turn something off and then it's an $8,000 bill. I racked up 10 grand the other day. I know what I'm doing. I racked up 10 grand the other day running a database from a demo for like 4 days because I was jerking around and cranked it up to like 128 gigs on a demo, right? Like hard to not accidentally just charge a bunch of money. So how do we get more operations experience? Like we don't have a lot of great options. Companies aren't going to cut their throughput by 20%. Universities aren't going to start teaching it. What are our options, right? And so like I'm gonna go ahead and pull the sticker off the logo on my shirt, but like this is where like the products are starting to come in, right? And that's where this big push for platform engineering, right? These teams that are actually able to do, like you see the people that are really succeeding at this thing, banging it. They're doing a great job, right? So good that they produce the Kubernetes. Wow, here's some leftovers that everybody else can have. Great, great, great. I'll take it. But here's the catch. Google ain't struggling to hire operations engineers. Everybody wants to work there. So now you're sitting, sorry, this is a long rant. So now you're sitting there. You're an engineering manager. You're looking at your team. You got 25 people. You're on Heroku. Your Heroku bills $3 million a year or whatever. And you're trying to do the math. Okay, if we move to the cloud, I'm going to have to hire some people, but how much money will I save? Oh, we all know that Heroku overcharges. Maybe you save 10%, 20, 40, 50, like you're doing that math, you're like, I got to hire this ops person. Okay. I know a decent ops person is going to cost you about 180 grand a year in salary, plus stock, plus taxes, plus vacation, plus all the other benefits. So now you're talking about, I got a 20-person engineering team. Now I'm talking about I need 250, 300 grand worth of budget to hire my first ops hire. Tell you what, when I see that as an engineer or as an ops person, I'm like, first ops hire, 20 engineers. I'm like, so my job is a load of technical debt day one. Okay, for 180 grand a year. Or I can go to Google and work on something really cool and probably make double that. So now you, as this healthcare company or the trash company or the small e-commerce company that is struggling to get this talent and you've gotten the budget, it takes you 90 days to place the role. It takes average 90 days to place an ops role. And then that person's not effective on day one. It is so easy to be a developer org and say like day one, we want people to ship something to prod. Change the color of a button. Like there's a small fix that you can do, but it's very hard for an operations person to give you value on day one. We're getting a lay of the land. We're looking at lucid charts. Like it's just, our job is much harder and there's a lot less of us, right? So I think the only option really to start scaling this is different products and services that are somewhere between a PaaS and the cloud, right? And there's a lot of them. There's us, there's Humanitechs of the world, there's Coveries, there's Terramates, Terrateams, Spacelift, M0. There's 1,000 tools out there that are all taking some of this edge off of like how much operational talent you need. I think it's building like a set of products that like make sense to people and figuring out like how to get people into the right ones. Because the reality is like every company on the planet can't come and use Massdriver. Every company on the planet can't go and use one of our competitors. Like teams, like organizations are very different. Teams are too. Right? Your front end team and your back end team and your ML team are all deploying stuff very differently. So I think we don't have a lot of great options besides moving past always rubbing culture on it. And maybe it's time to rub some tooling on it. Like we got to figure out like something else in between. And that's why I think this platform engineering movement has so much volume behind it and so much pressure behind it because we don't have much between a strict PaaS and the cloud today. And I think people are looking for solutions to make that work. So, yeah, sorry about that. I gotta take a sip.
That was awesome, by the way. So in terms of, I agree with you. And in terms of what people want, that's always the question. You look at all these solutions out there, and a lot of them, some of them are graphical in nature, which is okay, and some of them are text in nature. And depending on who's consuming it, you kind of need both because there's different contexts for different jobs, and you want to build them and you want to kind of drag them and allow different views for different teams and things like that. But what do you think people are looking for in terms of their needs now? This has evolved so much. When I was involved with one of these solutions, it was infrastructure first, and it was like, let's look at the infrastructure, we'll build up to the app. Nowadays, I feel like with DevOps and really platform engineering and everything around there, it's about the application. So you're really looking at an application centric view, and then it's almost like you're looking at it the reverse way. So has that influenced what you guys are doing? And by the way, talk a little bit about what Massdriver does, but also what do people want in this day and age? What is it that you're seeing out there?
Yeah, I think that so the application view of the world has actually influenced us heavily, and I think that a lot of people in this, especially in the platform engineering space, get that, right. Like that's why we have this whole like platform as a product movement and phrase that we all use. It's like whatever you're building or buying like should give your developers like that Heroku-esque magic, right? And like that is like that's the real deal. Like, I mean, there's plenty of people that may not have used Heroku because they've been in data centers, or they maybe it's just this newer generation that missed it. But when it showed up, it was magic. Like it was truly like versus the way that we did things. And you can still go use it. Like Vercel gives you that for like front end, but like it falls apart when you need to start having this split view of the world. So I think it's influenced a lot of people in the platform engineering space pretty heavily. Massdriver, the way our tool works is, so we are one of these graphical tools. I'm going to throw quotes around it. So we are, if you look at Massdriver, it looks like a no code tool. You draw your infrastructure and it's super low fidelity. So like you're drawing stuff, it kind of looks like a whiteboard. We try not to make it super fancy. We actually want it to feel kind of like a whiteboard because that's where you're doing the engineering work originally, right? Like we walk up to a whiteboard, you draw 4 boxes, right? Some engineer draws 4 boxes, draws some lines between them. The ops person's looking at that and like, that's not 4 boxes. That's 500 cloud resources that you just drew into 4 boxes. Like we know we're like, that's not 4 boxes. But here's the catch. If you go and you diagram a VPC, truly diagram of VPC, it's subnets, route tables, etc., you end up with 40, 50, 60 things with 200 lines between it. It is unbearable to an engineer. An engineer is never going to operate that. An engineer is never going to build it and run it, right? And so that application view of the world has heavily influenced us. So the way the tool works is it's GUI for your developers, but behind the scenes, it's all infrastructure as code, whether it's Ansible, Pulumi, Terraform, Helm, whatever. You can actually technically bring your own container and just throw bash scripts in it if you want. But what effectively happens is as I'm diagramming stuff, it's pulling from essentially a registry of IAC that's been built by your DevOps engineers. So now your DevOps people don't have to learn Backstage and TypeScript to like enable developer self-service. They just write Terraform. And then when they write their Terraform and they got their OPA rules, they publish it into Massdriver. And now when an engineer goes, oh, I'm making a new service, database, my service, it pulls the database from our registry. Like I don't have to go hunt and peck for Terraform modules, set up a CI pipeline, figure out how to get secrets into it, figure out how to get my variables into it, figure out how to do my workspace management from it, figure out where to store the state. Like I literally just draw the thing and we take care of all the infrastructure automation behind the scenes to like do all that. And we're pulling it from your IAC. So you know as an ops engineer, my developers are getting compliance and security, right? From a developer point of view, you're seeing these bigger boxes, right? I need Postgres. Locally, I brew installed Postgres. It was so easy. Or we had a Docker Compose file and I just added a line that said image Postgres. And I'm back to writing code. Then you get to the cloud and your tests pass because somebody added Postgres to your GitHub Actions. And somebody's like, oh, it's all green, merge. And then production goes down because nobody deployed Postgres in prod. Like the amount of times I've seen that happen, it's so easy. Like when you have an ops team way over here and you have a developer team over here, even if you've torn down the silos, like they're looking at different things all day long. It's so easy for that to sneak up on you. And so the way our platform works is like you have this little config file. It can get to be very big. So almost everything about our platform is customizable, but like the bare minimum for an application, you actually formalize your application's requirements. I'm expecting this environment variable. I'm not going to work without it, right? I'm expecting this secret. I'm not going to work without it. I'm expecting this piece of infrastructure, which I call Postgres. I'm not going to be able to work without it. And so now what's happening is you formalize your requirements. And so Massdriver does a lot of really cool stuff. You go to deploy that app. Nobody set that environment variable. We cease deploying. Didn't take it down, and because the environment variable was, it halted your CI pipeline, which you didn't have to build because when you're actually drawing the infrastructure, we're building a CI pipeline behind the scenes. So it actually builds out like a full DAG and CI pipeline. But what's really interesting is coming back to that application focus. As a developer, I know I need Postgres. And so I added Postgres, literally just type the word Postgres to my list of things that I need. And when Massdriver goes to schedule that application the first time, he goes, oh, you don't have Postgres in production. Let me add it for you. Your ops team's already defined what Postgres looks like. I have the Terraform module for it. I'm going to add it. I'm going to store the state. I'm going to take care of everything. I'm going to present to you like the variables that you need to fill in. You fill it in. And then I'm going to inject the Postgres credentials directly from the database into your runtime. Like you as the developer didn't have to think about secrets. You didn't have to think about Terraform. You didn't have to think about a CI pipeline. You had to think, I need Postgres. And you have Postgres. And your operations team isn't like, did they do it right? Like, you know that they did, right? And like that is how we're trying to scale this ops team. Like that, at the end of the day, I feel like there's a lot of people in the platform engineering community that I enjoy having conversations with. They might be competitors of mine, but I feel like the focus of like, we need to give developers better DevX. I'm sorry, developers' lives are very easy compared to operations engineers' lives. You guys got napped pods, right? There's 200 of you. Like the goal of platform engineering should go back to that DevOps article. We need to scale operational talent. And if we let ops people focus on what they know and just say, hey, kick it off to some technology that makes sure it's dumb easy for developers to just draw some stuff without learning my tooling, but we all get what we need. Like that's how we're trying to help scale operational talent. But if anybody else wants to, go ahead and get MIT to start teaching Kubernetes courses, go for it. Like, I think that might also be a really great solution. Or if your company wants to, shed 20% of your feature time so you guys can hang out with the ops team, I think that would also be.
So what do you say to people? So I'm going to go to KubeCon in less than a month, right? So we'll go to Paris. You'll be there? Okay, so we'll have beers, definitely. What do you say to the people who are there? So I full disclosure, I used to work for Pertainer for Neil Creswell over there. Yeah. And there's a lot of people out there, and I also ran was the TME for Scalar, which became Cloud Center within Cisco, which was an orchestration engine. And the problem that we've always had traditionally was that you have this great solution, but then there's you try and talk to people at like a KubeCon, and they're like, well, this doesn't really fit the classical mold. Like, I want to be this GitOps lifecycle, true Terraform person, just Kubernetes all the way. It has to be controllers. It has to be, and this doesn't represent it the same way. It doesn't have the same way to interact with it. I'm not learning how to do true. And by the way, I'm putting quotes up because I totally don't believe in this either. But, quotes up that it has to be true. Like, this is how you do it, documented Kubernetes way. How do you answer to those people? Because I feel like, first of all, KubeCon's the wrong place for that, because those people are so, and I include myself, as a technologist, so I'm probably one of them. But, they're going to say, well, I just want to do this the way that they recommend doing it, and it's right out of the box, and it's raw Kubernetes, So what's your answer to those kind of arguments?
Yeah, so it's going to be really exciting because we're sponsoring KubeCon. Like, we're jumping right into the lion's mouth, so it's going to be fun. But we also sponsored reInvent though this year, and honestly, the night before reInvent, I texted my COO. So he's Chief Operating Officer. The joke is he's an ops engineer, so that's funny. So I'm like, what are we going to do if nobody comes to our booth? Like, we're a startup. We just threw a lot of money into this booth. I'm like, what are we going to do if no one comes to our booth? Like, and I'm sitting here thinking, like, we got like 1,800 shirts. I'm like, I'm going to be dragging 1,700 shirts home. And what was interesting was, on one side of our booth was O'Reilly. On the other side was, oh my gosh, Canonical, Ubuntu.
Okay.
We're way back in the corner, the infrastructure corner. They were dead. Our booth was 6 wide, 6 deep the entire time.
That's awesome.
And the thing that brought people, nobody knew who we were. Like, we're a startup, right? Like, nobody knew who Massdriver was. What attracted people was we were I'm pretty sure the only company that had the words platform engineering on our booth, which is part of the reason that we thought we were going to get eaten alive, right? And this is kind of what I'm expecting at KubeCon, but I'm curious if it's going to be similar. But what happened was, almost everybody that came up to our booth was, oh, so you guys, platform engineering, cool. That's curious. You guys one of those companies are like just pumping that term, and we're like, yeah, we are. Like, what are you guys doing? Like, how's your life? And then we talked to people about, like, it's fine what you want to do, but like, what is the reality of your life, right? And so like, oh, I want to be running everything as a controller, doing GitOps. My engineers are going to learn Kubernetes. Like, they're going to learn like to figure how to make custom resources. Like, they're not. Where are you right now? And they're like, we're still running some Ansible playbooks, and we're starting to adopt Terraform. It's like, okay, so that place that you want to get to, you are never going to get there. You can want to get there all you want, but the reality is today, like looking at the state of CV report, 27% of companies has adopted infrastructure as code. And that's including Ansible, right? So it's like, okay, whoa, I thought we were all doing DevOps, right? Like we're all doing, like we all said it. Like I saw a guy on Hacker News. He's like,
we shook hands. We did the pinky swear.
Yeah, like, oh, you guys are doing the DevOps thing, right? It's like I thought we were all doing DevOps, but at the same time, only 27% of us have started doing IC. And I venture to say, of those 27%, it's probably like a team, like not 100% rolled out across the company. So it's like, how are you automating things if you're not doing IC today? And it's like what we're seeing with these teams is we had platform teams coming up to our booth and saying, oh, you guys still a platform engineering solution. Well, what do you guys do? And it's like, well, what do you do today? And it's like, I do operations work. They just call me a platform engineer. We've been rebranded, right? Or you'd see somebody like, oh, well, I do a lot of feature work for the product. And it's like, well, I thought you were on the platform team. It's like, yeah, but I was on the product team. Like I have a lot of product knowledge. So like they pull me over every once in a while. It's like, okay, so you're not doing platform engineering. You're a person who's working two jobs right now. You're working for your platform product and you're working for the thing that actually makes your company money. The reality is, it's like these teams are getting branded platform engineering, but they're still not doing the work. And so I'm expecting we'll see something similar at KubeCon. I think the bias at KubeCon will be people, I think, are a little more further along than reInvent. So like if you look at like the reInvent prospectus, like it's like 60% of people have maybe a production workload. Like, so it's like a handful of people are still in the cloud, different clouds, like trying to get there. I feel like KubeCon will be a bit further. So I think with KubeCon, I think that the real rub is like, you want to be running Kubernetes. Your engineers don't give a shit. They don't. Like, and probably honestly, like from Twitter and LinkedIn, they probably have a bad taste in their mouth about Kubernetes and haven't even tried it yet, because everybody's like, Kubernetes is so hard. It is if you do it the hard way and you set it up on Raspberry Pis. But if you're running EKS or AKS or GKE, like most of the hard parts solved for you. If you click that Fargate or Cloud Run button, like 20% more of the problems solved for you. Like the reality is, I think that Kubernetes is the thing that can actually make a lot of this chaos like contained. Because if we can all agree that this is the model that we're going to operate on, my knowledge is now portable. Right, I can go to this other company and they're doing Kubernetes too. I understand like 80% of what's going on day one versus like you've configured all this random jazz you put together with ECS and whatever glue you've put together. So I think that there we're going to see a lot more people that like they want to do it the cloud native way, but their developers don't. And the reality is like Backstage isn't enough. And that's what we're going to hear is people like, well, Backstage, like it's like, okay, Backstage, that's great. It is a useful tool. Like being able to understand where your applications are and like spin up a template, like that's great. But like, what does it do for you besides that? So you need to deploy Postgres. What do? You make a Backstage module for it. Okay. Do you know TypeScript? Oh, you don't. You don't know TypeScript because you're an ops engineer. You've mostly written in like Python and Terraform your whole life. Well, just go learn some TypeScript so you can add modules. Well, my engineers are going to do that. It's like, okay, so your engineers are now doing operational work, right? Okay, so like how is that moving you closer to this promised land that you think you're going to get to? The reality is like you don't have good tooling to get you there. You can run on Kubernetes with Massdriver if you want. And guess what? You can have something that feels like GitOps. I question GitOps. Why do we do GitOps? Like, I feel like a lot of people say it. I haven't seen a lot of people like really, really doing it, but like, why do we do it? Like, why do we do it? We want parity and we want an audit trail. Great. Is there a way to get parity in an audit trail without having like the burden of a CI platform and like configuring stuff and like looking at diffs of YAMLs? Yeah, I think there is. And that's one of the things that our platform does is you get parity out of the box for as many environments as you want to spin up. And you get an audit trail of what's changed, even change history, separation of duty, whatever you need. But like, why are we trying to get to this GitOps thing? Like it works great for deploying your application, but when it comes to configuration, you get in all these weird cases where it's like, okay, wait, well, like this builds the instance, this configures the instance, this deploys the app. Like these things got to run in a certain order to get my deployment out. And it's like, I got to remember, like we open this PR, but we got to go over here to this other repo. Like you introduce so much chaos, like trying to get to GitOps. Like how do we even lay out all of our repos? Is the Terraform in my applications repo? Like is the cloud services that I need? Because this starts to get interesting. Well, the Kubernetes cluster isn't. Okay. What about my SQS queue? because that's mine. Like that's effectively my database, right? For some events, right? I know it's not a database, guys. Chill out. But like, where's the SQS queue? Is that over in the SQS Terraform repo, or is there like a root module repo where we manage all of our queues, or does that live with my code, right?
This is all very well defined, by the way.
Yeah,
Yes,
it is,
I'm saying
right?
that sarcastically, but yes.
Yeah. So now we're doing GitOps. It's like okay. So now I got to remember like, okay, so how many we're doing GitOps? This is great. How many? I've got 40 PRs open right now. Did that make 40 SQS queues? Did I make an SQS queue for every PR that opened? Do I have a preview environment? Is it going to shut down those SQS queues when I merge that? Like how is this GitOps thing actually making our lives better? I think that's the real question. So it's like somebody wants, we want Kubernetes, we want GitOps. It's like, what does your developers want?
Well, it's funny because I often have this conversation about that. Just like when people were told that, hey, we want to be cloud first, the CIOs would all say, yeah, go be cloud first. I heard this buzz. Let's go all be cloud first. Now we have the same problem in kind of the cloud native world where we're told, hey, we have to put our application in containers. Why? What are you trying to do? Do you need redundancy? Do you need scalability? Do you need multi-zone? Do you need, and a lot of people aren't even thinking about that. They're just saying, I heard containers and containers is where I need to be. I heard GitOps. GitOps is where I need to be, but there's no real like thought process to why we need these things. It's because it's the new thing, the new tech, the new whatever. And I'll tell you, and I've said this on my show many times, I'm the first to do it because I'm a technologist. Yeah. But I work for emerging tech. So it's my job to know what the emerging tech is. Yeah. But, people, I think, and this is one of my frustrations and pet peeves, is that not everybody should be doing that. It should be about what your needs are. And I don't think enough people think about what the needs are of their application. Is it a front end? Is it a back end? Do they need to communicate? Does it need to communicate with an old AIX, machine or an iSeries or whatever, Yeah.
So what's really interesting?
Yeah, go ahead.
There's something that I think is very interesting about like the GitOps movement, because I feel like next time somebody preaches GitOps to you, ask them what they do for configuration drift. Oh, I love that question. Like there's so many people that are looking for like configuration drift products. And it's just like, your infrastructure didn't change itself. A person did that. A person introduced that change. So why do you have drift? They're following your policies and your practices. They're doing the GitOps thing, right? So how did their infrastructure drift? It's because they thought the GitOps thing sucked and they logged into the AWS console and they changed there, right? Like the problem is like, it's like oh my God, we do this so much in our industry. Like we have to solve a problem and then we're like, well, I guess I got to buy another product to solve like the problem that this thing created, right? So it's like, okay, we've got GitOps in place, but now we got to buy something that does like drift, or like we just run the CI pipeline every 20 minutes and just apply it, right? Like if somebody made a change in AWS, change it back. Oh, what happens for that person that like they were on call and they weren't near a computer and they fixed something through the AWS console real quick. Rolled back and now you have an outage. Oh, that's not great, right? Like the reality is like you can't solve every problem with one tool. Like that's just not going to happen, right? And that's what's I think is important here is like making sure that we are doing things that work for the engineers at the end of the day. And so one of the ways that we kind of do this is we support all the models. If you want to do GitOps, you can do GitOps. What's really cool about like the way we integrate is we have our CLI command and you throw it into your developer's Git repo, and whether it's an application they're deploying or a Terraform module or Ansible, whatever it is, it's the same CLI command. Like, because what's actually happening in Massdriver is we're building these virtual DAGs of CI pipelines for like building out and deploying all your infrastructure. And so you just say, I want to deploy my app. And we know behind the scenes, like your secrets are coming from here, the app's going there, your IAM policies are coming from here. We automate all that stuff and do that deployment for you. That's great. You did your GitOps. But if your developer does need to see something, and maybe they want to see the metrics alongside the configuration change, or we have this like visual diffing where you can like visually diff like your configuration. How do you do that? You can do a bunch of Git diffs, but you got 40 PRs that are merging, right? Like it's very hard to like start to split your application's Git diff where there's a little bit of Terraform code in here. There's 4,000 lines of a feature and then like some configuration change right here. Like I just need to see what's changed in my environment. And that might be my Git repo, or it might be the ops team's Git repo, because the ops team, or maybe we have a DBA, and the DBA manages all the database Terraform, and I manage my SQSQ Terraform because like it's mine, right? Okay, well, how do I figure out what's going on in that scenario? Do I go do a bunch of git diffs on his repo and on my repo and go, okay, here's all the things that changed this week. Like our platform visualizes it for you. I can say what's changed about this environment this week, and it's going to show me your Terraform code for the database. It's going to show me mine. It's going to show me my application config. I can say, oh, in the last 3 hours, somebody scaled down the database. Somebody actually switched this queue to FIFO, and our application was deployed 20 minutes ago. Like now I have an understanding in the context of what's happened in this environment, and it's visual. That lowers mean time to resolution. Like I'm not looking at a bunch of dashboards pinging people on Slack, and like that at the end of the day is what matters, not if you've got GitOps and you've deployed the coolest Kubernetes operator. Like getting developers writing features and also solving problems on their own so that they're not grabbing operations and jerking them away from whatever they're trying to do to say, hey, I have an outage, what do I do? Right? Like that is self-service. Self-service isn't just deploying something through Git. Self-service is being able to build it and run it on the abstraction level that I've been given. And I'd say that a Kubernetes abstraction level is a pretty one for a developer. Sorry.
We'll leave that,
I think it's going to be exciting.
I think that's a great place to leave it at. If you had if you had one thing to tell people, that are thinking about how to solve this, what would you tell people? And keep it short because we're already over time, but I love talking to you. So
I'd say there's a lot of tools out there, and I say that particularly for teams where you're based on who we met at reInvent, and we did 1,200 demos at reInvent, like full on demos. Like I said, we were slammed, and what we kept seeing was operations teams or DevOps teams that were being rebranded as platform, or maybe like we pulled 2 engineers from the product and like we're the platform team now. So I think the thing that sucks about this whole movement the most is there's plenty of great products to buy out there. Buy my product, buy our competitor's product. I want you to do something. I'm tired of getting breach notices. Like, do something. But what I think really sucks is the people that are kind of being put, because some people are being rebranded, and some people are being dictated to, hey, we got to move to platform engineering now. CIO said so. I read a Gartner report, and now these people that are like they're outnumbered 3 to 100, all of a sudden have this pressure of building an external product like on top of them. But they're the people that are also the furthest from product day in, day out. Right? So it's like, oh, having engineers go think through platform as a product makes sense. But having this operations person that's worked at the bottom of the stack, that's hard. And what happens a lot of times is we are perfectionists. We do want to get to GitOps and Kubernetes. And so we'll sit around for 2 years trying to build our internal platform and nobody will adopt it. It's like getting that mindset. Actually, I don't know if we're allowed to do this. We're actually doing a workshop on this. So unrelated to Massdriver, we don't do any like sales spamming during our webinar. But it's product management for operations engineers. So they can actually understand like how to survey people, how to collect that information, like how to figure out like what to do first so that you can ship value by the end of the month. Like if you're already on that platform engineering path and you're like 4 or 5 weeks in and like somebody isn't like, wow, you've wasted 4 or 5 weeks. Like the name of the game here is getting people wowed and getting them excited about what you're doing. Otherwise you're going to spend a ton of time working on it and then the initiative's going to fail. And you're going to be right back to doing operations, but you'll have that platform engineering title and that pay bump. So that's pretty nice.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming out here. I do know that just because we just talked that you will be in Paris at KubeCon. So I look forward to seeing you there.
Yeah.
So check out, Cory and and Massdriver out there. And we'll see you hopefully sometime soon.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.